Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, New Release, The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It is the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyofcruising.net. It helps support the channel through our partnership with Where's Walters Travel. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on air.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome Carol McQuaid, artist, writer, blogger, world traveler, and creator of the Illustrated Vagabond. I am so excited to bring Carol to the listeners of the Joy of Cruising podcast, a seafaring artist who travels the world sketching, painting, and teaching art workshops. From www.theillustratedvagabond.com. I love to travel, teach, and make art. I've been showing in galleries and teaching watercolor painting and printmaking around the globe for a few decades. I'm based in Canada, but spend more time on the road than not. I get invited on cruise ships to teach watercolor and printmaking, which gives me a great opportunity to travel the globe. I also do workshops and artists in resident experiences. I love to draw, especially on location. It used to be in little sketchbooks, some of which I'd make by hand. Now it's mostly on my iPad using Procreate. It's never about what ends up on the paper or posted on social media. It's about the act of really observing. It's a meditation. I love that. The drawings on here are all done by hand with an Apple Pencil, not an app. The writing is also done by an actual human, me. I understand there's a use for AI, but I hope it doesn't replace real human creative effort. That would make me sad. Carol just completed the world voyage on the Azamara Onward as its onboard art instructor. Apart from her love of cruising and teaching art to passengers, Carol has kept a sketchbook of the entire world voyage and created a gorgeous fully illustrated book that is about to hit the bookshelves. It's full of all the top port stops, some good planning info, and lots of fun sketches and stories of life on board. Welcome, Carol, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Well, thank you, Paul. I'm super excited to be here.
Great to meet you virtually. How you doing?
I'm good.
Before we discuss your pretty unique contributions to cruising that I am fascinated about, tell our listeners about yourself, where you're from, your background, growing up, and then as an adult, whatever you would like to share.
Sure. So I am Canadian, grew up on the west coast of Canada. I'm from a big family full of boys. I'm the youngest and the only girl. So we had a very kind of outdoorsy, rough and tumble upbringing, which was great. Vacations were not like cruising or going to Disneyland or Hawaii. It was open the car doors, everybody pile in. We're going to a lake, and we'd sit around the campfire, play our guitars, or ski trips, that kind of thing, which was ideal as a childhood. But for me, being the only girl, I always had this kind of desire for the Audrey Hepburn, traipsing around Europe life. And as soon as I got the chance, when I became an adult and could leave home, that's exactly what I did. I went out, traveled Asia, traveled Europe, had these great experiences, really fell in love with traveling. And that's kind of defined my life since then. I realized I needed a career to do all that. So I decided to go to design school, which I did here on the West Coast, and got a great education in that and started a design business. So my whole career has kind of oscillated between taking on projects, doing design or sort of design related businesses, retail businesses that are related to that, and then pulling away from that and really focusing on just creating art. And I've been lucky enough to be able to travel, create, teach, do residencies through my whole career. So it's just been lucky. It's been a total gift.
For someone who used to cut geography class regularly, uh, refresh my memory. What's on the west coast of Canada?
So Vancouver is the city. That's basically where I grew up. Big, beautiful, modern city surrounded by mountains. And now when I am here in Canada, I live in the mountains, which is great too. So yeah, yeah.
Beautiful city. I've been to Vancouver. I did a cruise a couple of years ago. It was a magical cruise. It was from Hawaii to Alaska,
Oh,
and it ended in Vancouver. So we did a an excursion on the day it ended, like a city tour. And oh my goodness, right? We have some pictures of Vancouver, and sometimes I'll post them on Facebook, and people don't know what city it is. And I get all of these, where is that?
yeah.
It was a nice place. Now, how close are you to, how close is Vancouver to Saskatchewan?
It is pretty far. Saskatchewan is more sort of towards the
So,
center of Canada, and Canada,
Center,
of course,
okay,
is huge.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That, other than Vancouver, Saskatchewan, I know the east side of Canada, but
yeah.
other than Vancouver, the only thing I know towards the west side is Saskatchewan because my son-in-law played for the Canadian Football League, and
Did
so
he for the Rough Riders,
yeah,
perchance?
yes, his most of his career, all of his career was in Saskatchewan. Um, although
Amazing.
I got to see him. We would go up when he played in Toronto. I saw him when he played in Montreal. I saw him. Never did get to Saskatchewan.
You know,
Too cold.
Paul, what is amazing, my dad was a Rough Rider. My dad played for
Oh,
the Saskatchewan.
really?
Yes, yeah, 100
Oh,
years ago. But yeah, no. And my
well,
husband was actually invited to the tryouts as well, but he went a different route. He ended up following his water skiing. He was on the national water skiing team. So that is so
oh,
funny. Yeah,
yeah. Well, offline, I have to get your dad's name and mention to my son-in-law because
yeah.
he even after he retired, he was a television commentator or personality, whatever you call it, in Saskatchewan for a while before he came back to the U.S. So.
Oh, isn't that something?
So I wouldn't be surprised if he knows, at least
Yeah,
knows your dad's name if he was a player. So,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
long before my son-in-law.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the intro your world voyage on Azamara onward.
Hmm.
So let's start our discussion by hearing the glorious details of the world voyage on the Azamara onward. That
Oh,
sounds like a my bucket list runneth over, but that sounds like a
exactly.
bucket list trip.
It was unbelievable. I feel so fortunate that I happened to land on this particular adventure. So the way the world voyage is set up, it's basically 10 consecutive cruises that are linked together. And we started in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale. It ran 155 days. We hit 6 continents, and I think it was 32 or 34 countries, somewhere in there. We just went everywhere, and it was so beautifully planned on the part of Azamara. The experiences were phenomenal. The itinerary was just absolutely packed, and I loved every one of those 155 days.
I know we could probably spend the entire interview talking about that trip, which we obviously don't have time to do, but give us a couple of highlights of your port stops.
Sure. So the canal was on my bucket list, the Panama Canal, and I was very happy to do it not in my own boat with somebody else, at the helm. So that was great. Easter Island was definitely a bucket list item. Pitcairn, actually being there and meeting the descendants of the Bounty mutineers, that was wild. We loved Sydney Harbor. I had never been, and I'm actually going back soon. I just fell in love with Sydney. Africa was unexpected because we ended up getting rerouted midway through our journey, as a lot of ships did this year. So yeah, Africa was fabulous. Tunisia, I loved. Just the whole thing was a beautiful blend of experiences, but those were some of the highlights. Yeah.
Wow. Australia Harbor. Everyone I interview, I always ask, what's on your bucket list? And these, most of the folks that I interview are world travelers, not all, but
Yeah.
are very experienced travelers. And Australia is probably number one on the bucket list, especially of really experienced travelers. So
Yeah, it's something else.
for those of us, I suspect most of our listeners, not all, but most of our listeners haven't been on Azamara. Say a little bit about the ship and the food and the amenities and so on.
Sure. So for me, Azamara is perfect. It's they're smaller ships. I think max capacity for guests is about 750. There are a couple of specialty restaurants, and then there's the big main dining room, Discoveries, which for me is everything you'd ever want in a restaurant. Gorgeous buffet upstairs. But what they do really well is rotating different experiences. They do a lot of, we're dining out by the pool deck tonight, and they'll set up a beautiful setting all around the pool, both levels, decorations, live music. Like, they really specialize in a smaller ship, very luxurious but laid back experience. And it's a perfect fit for us. We really enjoy Azamara in general, and the Onward was great. There are a few little kind of tuck away spots. There's a very, very cool bar, great piano lounge. But for us, it is a really great experience. My husband loves that it's more laid back. There's no getting super fancy for dinner, but you can if you want. And it's small enough you really get to know people. That was a really nice part of it.
You might have said this. I missed it. How many were on board? Approximately
750 is max capacity.
Okay.
So of that, just under 200 were the world voyagers. So they were going the full way around. And then at the end of each segment, it was 10 segments. A lot of the population would get off, others would get on, and the kind of demographic would change each time we finished a leg, which kept it super interesting. And so we fluctuated from kind of like 550 to 7. Going around Africa, we were a much smaller group because that was an unscheduled part of the tour. We were just under 200 passengers, which made it really interesting. It was just a great experience all the way around.
Great. So talk about your role teaching art on Azamara.
Sure. So when I come on board, usually they bring on an artist when you've got more sea days, which is great. So I will be teaching only on sea days. And generally we'd teach a 1-hour class. If there was a crowd, we would teach it twice so more people could experience that. So I generally taught 2 classes a day. And cruise ships usually bring on watercolor teachers because it's very kind of accessible. It's something most people can do, and it's easy to have the supplies there. So I did that. But because this was such a long voyage, they said, hey, why don't you bring on another type of art too? And it'll give people more variety. For me, I'm a painter and a printmaker. And like a crazy person, I decided to bring everything for printmaking. So I had equipment for 30 people, 60 pounds of linoleum that I carted onto the ship.
Oh my goodness.
And we made prints, and people loved it. That was a really different kind of part of this journey, was that I introduced a lot of people to printmaking and watercolor, and the balance of the two just really kept the excitement up in the art room, for sure.
Was it an extra charge for passengers, or it just was included?
It's
Uh-huh.
just included. It's wide open. Everybody can come, and we provide
Mm-hmm.
everything for
Mm-hmm.
them. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let me go back a little bit. At what age did you start? Well, I said I was going to ask, what age did you start sketching? What age did you start artwork?
Sure. So it's kind of funny. I said I was the youngest in a big family. And by the time I came along, my older brother had kind of taken the title of family artist. He got the oil paints and was, doing copies of Da Vinci paintings when he was like 10. And I didn't really lock into my artistic side. I was always doodling and sketching. I loved coloring books and making paper dolls when I was really little. But I didn't really discover my artistic side when I was small. It wasn't until I was needing to figure out what I was going to do for a career. And I fell in love with this idea of being a designer. I went to apply to design school and discovered you need a portfolio to get in. So I was in my early 20s. I went out and took every night school class I could on painting, sketching, drawing, quickly put together a portfolio, submitted it, and discovered I had a talent for it. I got into a really hard to get into school, and that was the start for me. And then in school, we learn how to render, which is a lot of watercolor painting, marker painting, and we get into the habit of keeping a sketchbook. You're always drawing design details, and that just became such a part of my life. Even when I wasn't doing design work, everywhere I went, I'd cart my sketchbook and be sketching my environment. And so it was the start of a really significant part of my life. I've kept an art practice all of these years. I've always had gallery representation and started teaching, and it's just, I would say it's taken over more of my life than the design aspect. So, all triggered by design school, but I found my own thing in it that really worked for me.
Keeping with your background, let's talk about your cruising background. When and what ship was your first cruise?
Right. So my first cruise was maybe 15 years ago. My husband got invited to go fishing in Alaska with a buddy. It was not a bring your wife kind of trip. And he knew that I love adventure and I'd be cranky if I couldn't come. So he went out and found a really good deal on a cruise ship. I think it was Norwegian. And he said, "Hey, why don't you take your mom and do an Alaska cruise while I go fishing with the guys?" And I did. So my mom and I went on this. I think it was about a 10-day. Can't even remember what ship it was. Uh, and it was great. But for me, really, I was with my mom and I was very focused on her, making sure she was having a good time and just enjoying her. That I didn't really fall in love with cruising. I had a great time, but I wasn't like, okay, sign me up for the next one. I just really enjoyed it. It wasn't until I got introduced to this concept of teaching at sea that I really got into it. And that happened a little later in 2015. I had just I'd been in an art show, and I ended up winning it was the Federation of Canadian Artists, and I did a piece that won their landscape part division. And so somebody came to my studio to interview me about this. And as we were talking, I was telling her about my travels and my painting. I do a lot of art residencies, so I'm always traveling, sketching, painting. And she was telling me about hers. And when she told me about traveling on a cruise ship and teaching, my face was just like, what? Like somebody gets to do that? And so she slipped me the name of her agent, and I reached out. They interviewed me, and that's when I started doing it on the ship. And for me, the experience changed radically. Like when I was with my mom, it was just all about her and I. We didn't connect with the rest of the passengers. We really just had our own adventure. When I went on teaching art, it really opened me up to meet other travelers and discover what their stories were, kind of experience it in a whole different way. The first trip I did on that program, I was hooked. I just loved it. So I've been teaching at sea since 2015. At first, just kind of treating it as a way to have a great vacation, but now it's turned into a lifestyle.
So that's when your art talent and passion for cruising kind of first intersected.
Yeah.
Do you remember that ship?
Oh, yeah. That was on the Queen Victoria. And
Oh,
at
wow.
the last minute, my husband couldn't go. It was a short trip. Well, short by short by world voyage standards. I think it was about a 2-week trip. And one of my girlfriends came with me. We did the Canary Islands, and we just had a blast. Like, I love Cunard. I love the glamour of it. I love the, getting dressed up in the theater, all of it. The ports were fantastic. But for me, it was teaching and having all these people come who either, some artists come, but a lot of people who hadn't really explored their artistic side since they were young came, and we just had this amazing time, kind of opening their eyes. When you're doing art and traveling, it becomes a really connected thing. And yeah, it was exciting to watch people kind of get turned on by looking at the world in a different way. So I was hooked at that point.
Say something about the creation of your brand, the Illustrated Vagabond. Were you by that time, were you the Illustrated Vagabond? Talk about how that started?
Sure. Yeah. So the Illustrated Vagabond is actually new. I started it just this last fall. I have my art practice and I had, my design business and a bunch of things going, but I wanted to do something that just focused on the sort of travel and adventure side of what I was doing. I had just gotten hooked on illustrating with my iPad. So I love to draw on my iPad. I love to draw on location, and I had just come back to Canada. We'd been living in Mexico for a while, and I had just come back to Canada, and I was drawing every day. And I thought, I want a way to share my travels with friends and family. And so I started the Illustrated Vagabond, and I was featuring just the iPad sketches of where I had been that day and the story of my travels. And it started out as a way for people who were interested in what I was doing to kind of keep up with my travels and see what I was up to. And it just grew from there. I really wasn't even planning on writing a book or doing anything like that, but the 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 sketches just started piling up, the experiences started piling up, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, I want to be able to experience this with you," people who were on the voyage with us. So I thought, I'm just going to put this together and make it a real thing. So I've got the book that's just come out, and art prints and cards and things like that, so that the people who are traveling with me, or the people who are armchair traveling with me, have a way to kind of participate in the adventure.
By this time, and you said it was not that long ago,
Mhm.
you probably had been cruising and teaching art quite a bit, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was from 2015 until just before COVID. I was doing it kind of, a month or two, well, probably a couple months a year. When COVID hit, I pulled back and got some other things going. So I wasn't traveling after COVID until this big adventure. So when it was time to start traveling again, I thought, let's do this fun project around it. So that's where the Illustrated Vagabond started.
Up until Illustrated Vagabond, talk about some of your highlights uh, of your career at sea.
Sure. So, yeah, I did a number of cruises, mostly on Queen Elizabeth, Queen Victoria, Queen Mary. We did a loop of the Baltic, which was fabulous. going to St. Petersburg. Wow, like just beautiful. We did a lot of Greece and Italy. We did a shorter cruise with Azamara from Singapore to Hong Kong. But really, like the ports have all been amazing. I've loved all that. But the highlight has been teaching, watching people reconnect with the artists that they were when they were kids. That's really been the highlight. And it helps to be in these amazing places. If we're in the Canary Islands and people are out walking around looking through artists' eyes, because we've been in the art room talking about how the sky is a different color higher up than it is at the horizon line, or how light hits a building. When you've got that art brain rolling, you look at everything differently. So I'm in all these amazing places. My art brain is cranked up on high, and so are the people I'm traveling with, because we've been having this dialogue. So that's really been the highlight. Like the places are almost secondary. It's experiencing them through an artist's eye. That's really been the highlight.
Now, those cruises between 15 and the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
they were like shorter cruises, right? You didn't do the long cruises like the Azamara World Cruise.
No, I was typically on for about a month and a half at the most. I would always look for, when they were looking for an artist, I would look to make sure I could get a couple of cruises in a row. So I like to get in, unpack, settle in, and go to bed and have another country pull up overnight is the highlight of cruising for me. And I never wanted to kind of make the effort to get there only to spend a week at sea. I like to be on for a good month and really kind of get into the experience. So
Wow.
yeah, I'd always pick things that were a few in a row if I could.
Yeah, so a month and a half. That's a long time to be on the water. We just did our first transatlantic, which I loved.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
but for my wife, it was too many sea days. Around our first when we first left, we had 8 straight sea days, and
Yeah.
around day 6, day 7, she was like, "I need land. I need land." So,
I get that.
yeah, yeah. So, what's the difference with doing longer versus shorter cruises? Talk about like the community that gets built on board,
Yeah.
how that
Yeah.
showed up with the people who were choosing to join you in the art classes.
Yeah. So for me, that was really the biggest eye opener of doing this world voyage was, we go on, and I always bring somebody with me. Usually it's my husband, but I've had a few opportunities to bring friends on with. Um, but when you are on for longer and you're doing crossings, right? That 8 days is a long time to be at sea. I think our longest one on this voyage was 9, going from Namibia to Las Palmas. Yeah, you need to be creative and find things to occupy your time. And what we found, we just were lucky enough to meet our cruise besties right off the hop. Like we just ended up in a situation where we bumped into a few couples who we really connected with. And I think that, if you're on for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, do you really invest the time to get to know the people you're traveling with? Maybe a little bit. But when you're on for over 5 months, you do. You need to. You're living in might be a beautiful room, but you're living in a small room with one person.
Right.
You need a bigger world than that. And we found, not just for us, like for us, we had a few couples we really connected with. And the people who came to the art room, you're having a very kind of soulful experience. So you're open and you're vulnerable and you talk while you create and you make these great connections. And so we had that experience. Fantastic. But I noticed in general on the ship, like people were really making great relationships. You'd connect with people, you'd plan excursions with them, side trips. My husband ended up connecting with a group of people who liked to find places to golf along the way. So they'd book a golf tour. I'd round up with some of my students and we'd find some fabulous group of galleries to go to, or just, I love to go kayaking. We'd find different things to do with different people. And, we've been back on land for over a month now, and we still keep in touch with these people all the time. And we're planning future adventures. And really, I think in the whole time we were on, my husband and I had dinner alone together maybe twice, not counting
Wow.
days when we'd hide out in our room from time to time, and just order room service and watch movies. But in the restaurant, I think maybe we had 2 days where we sat, and, held hands and stared into each other's eyes. The rest of the time, we were at these, what just felt like fabulous dinner parties every night. And so I think, connecting with that bigger group, it's like it becomes like a small town. And there's a real beauty in that.
Now, I suspect, correct me if I'm wrong, I suspect that with long cruises, did you tend to have a lot more repeat students than you did with the short cruises? Or it's pretty much the same?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, usually when I teach, there's sort of a few groups that typically show up. There's the people who love to paint anyways. They're coming, they've got their own supplies, they know what they're doing, they just want space and camaraderie. And then
Now,
there, Mhm.
Carol, let me jump in.
Sure.
For those people
Mhm.
that you just mentioned, they know you're going to be on the ship, or they bring their stuff anyway.
I think a lot of people know, they know the cruise lines who typically have art instructors on board. And I think there's also a lot of people who do just travel with a sketchbook and supplies.
Okay,
It's a real trip enhancer, no matter who you are
okay.
and who you connect with. So yeah, there are people who will always show up with a little compact watercolor kit or a sketchbook, and they're coming regardless. They if there's a class, great, they'll come. If not, they'll be squirreled away somewhere sketching. And then there are people who get on the ship and they look at the itinerary for the day on a sea day, and they think, well, maybe I'm not a bridge player, and I don't necessarily live for trivia. Maybe I'll try this art thing. Like I liked to draw as a kid. Maybe I'll give it a go again. And those are the people that I love to see, because they come up and, they always end up reconnecting with a part of themselves and just having this really cool experience. And yeah, so they typically, once they come, they're pretty hooked, and they come throughout. So with something like the World Voyage, where we have a community of just under 200 people, there's going to be a percentage of them who make their way to the art group. So we would have maybe 15, 20 people from that population who are coming steady. But then with each changing turnover, every time we end one leg of the voyage and start another, there's a whole new population. And then we
That's right. You
yeah,
did say that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it kind of refreshes the energy in the art room. We've got some people who have a ton of experience and they want to share, some people who are so excited because they've just gotten turned on to making art, and yeah, it changes the dynamic as we go. So, and some of those people are on for 3 or 4 segments. So yeah, it's just a really interesting kind of changing gently as we go experience. And when you have that kind of length of time with people, when they're putting that kind of time into making art, they make real progress. So people are excited to see what other people are doing. They're cheering each other on. They're feeling really good about something they're making that they didn't know they could do. And it eats up those sea days. When you're doing a crossing that's 7 or 9 days, all of a sudden people aren't like, oh my God, is the land ever going to appear? Instead, they're thinking, no, I need another day to finish this painting. And yeah, so it just adds something different to the experience for sure.
You ever have any, well, every customer is special and unique, but not custom every passenger.
Yeah.
But you ever have any notable students, maybe someone who's an artist in their regular life, or
Yeah.
a celebrity, or Anyone we might know?
Yeah. So one of the cool things that I've experienced is the performers, like people who are artsy are generally or people who feed that in themselves. What you feed grows, right? There's a lot of crossover between artists and musicians. And in my experience, a lot of the entertainers love to come to the art class. So we'll be watching an incredible soprano singer in the theater at night, but she's just as excited to come and participate in the art class. So yeah, we get a lot of the performers come. Some of the production crew over the years have really come, and it's really fun to see what kind of work they do. And yeah, but no, there's such a broad range of people who are attracted to doing this. We get everybody from, like a lot of young people who are cruising will come up, and that breathes a different energy into the room. People who are on their first cruise, yeah, it's very broad who shows up, but yeah, having the people who are performing is always a special treat because people are excited to get to know them in a different way too.
Now, when I was interacting with you earlier, you shared with me that you have some tips and tricks regarding planning port stops for art lovers. Talk about that.
Sure. So, it's such a rich part of a culture when you're in a place, seeing the art that is created there. And I think, a lot of people will do we'll call it the low hanging fruit. If you're going someplace to go and visit the big main gallery is just such an obvious thing. And that's always great. But what I find really interesting is searching for artist studios and art walks. Like most cities have, it'll be like a Friday night art walk once a month. You might not hit the day when the art walk is on, but it'll show you where that nest of really cool galleries are. So finding the enclaves where all the studios are. For example, in Dubai, there's a really cool warehouse district that is full of little galleries and super artsy shops, strange theaters, that kind of thing, that I never would have found if I hadn't searched artist studios in that city. So that's one way to do it. Find the. Mhm.
It sounds like you do, I'm sorry for interrupting. It sounds
Yeah.
like you do a fair amount of research in advance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If I'm heading into, well, there's always the excursions that the ship makes available, which gives you a pretty good idea of sort of the big things that people see. And, if there's something on there, there's often trips to, galleries and palaces and churches and things that'll be artistically inspiring. One of the things I love about Azamara is we do a lot of overnight, so you'll get 2 days in the big cities. So yeah, we'll go do the big things that everybody, the must sees. But on that next day, I love to seek out, if there is a gallery walk, it'll usually show you where there's 10 cool galleries all in a very short area, walking distance. And you get to see more of what is really happening in that city, what's being created. Yeah, just stumbling into that kind of thing. One of the big highlights of this last trip was we were heading into Venice, and I was doing my usual, what's on in Venice, where are the art studios, where are the art walks. And I didn't really realize that the Biennale, it's like the Olympics for artists. It happens every 2 years, and it takes over two massive areas in Venice. And we just happened to be hitting it. Like the one day we were spending in Venice, the Biennale was on. So I partnered up with one of my art students, and both of our poor husbands got dragged along. And we went and did what usually you would take a week to explore at least. And we just got up at the crack of dawn and hammered it out and went to every exhibition that was part of the Biennale in a single day. We just made it back to the ship all bedraggled and exhausted, but it was a fabulous experience that came from, searching for what's going on artistically in that city. And it's just, it creates a different opportunity.
Now, just an aside, are you a Picasso fan?
I am a Picasso fan. Yes, absolutely.
Well, you'll be proud of me. We out on that transatlantic cruise that I mentioned. We stopped at Malaga, which
Uh-huh.
is, as you know, Picasso's birthplace.
Mhm.
So we went to the house where he was born, um, and then we also went to a gallery that was owned by his sister.
Oh,
So, you
wow.
know, I was like a kid in the candy shop. Not that I'm a real deep, Picasso fan, but when I was living in Florida, I went to, you probably have heard of the Dali Museum
Yeah.
in Florida, and they were having, this was like the last year I was in Florida before I moved, which I'm in North Carolina now. Dali Museum was having a traveling Picasso exhibit. It was in the U.S. for a limited period of time. So I went to that and just became mesmerized by Picasso. So when we stopped in Malaga, that was like, probably the greatest excursion I've been on because again, like I
Wow.
said, we went to his house and there were a lot of paintings on the wall in his house because his father was a fairly renowned artist in his own right. So his father's work was in his house, but then we went to the museum, or not the gallery, and it was just, Picasso. If you love Picasso, your head would explode.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
so,
yay.
so yeah, that was a great trip. I even have a picture, one with just my wife, and then someone took a picture of my wife and I sitting on a park bench next to a sculpture of Picasso. So yeah, you got to get to if you haven't been, you got to get to Malaga.
Yeah, it is on my list. I think it might even actually be on my list when I look at my upcoming stuff. That is amazing. And I think like an artist's role really is to see the world around them and interpret it. So when we get to kind of tuck in and look through an artist's eyes, we're looking at the places we're going, we're looking at, culture and community. And yeah, even you don't need to be an artist to just for that to be an amazing experience. So that sounds so cool. I'm very happy you had that experience.
Now, speaking of sounding cool, this sounded cool. When we talked earlier, you mentioned something about painting on location in different places. What goes into setting up for painting on location? What's that experience like?
Right. So I've been addicted to sketchbook journaling and painting plein air. It's called plein air for most of my life. And it is, you're sitting just responding to what is in front of you. In fact, I just went out the other day with a group of artist friends here in Vancouver, and we had a big plein air day where we all painted our environment. And it just gets you so tuned in to observing your surroundings and responding to them. It's a beautiful feeling, like regardless of what ends up on the piece of paper. It's just a
Hmm.
beautiful experience to be out there doing that. So I used to do it as a watercolorist. I kept a bag. And for people who are interested in this, if you go on my blog, I have a page that says watercolor essentials, and it tells you exactly what you need to have in your watercolor bag. Keep it by the door so you're going to grab it when you go out. And it's really easy, very compact. It's smaller than most people's purses, and you can have a sketchbook and your palette and brush, water, everything in there. Great. So I did that for years. But what I do now is I just carry my iPad and my Apple Pencil. And if you have the right kind of tools loaded in, the experience is very similar to painting with wet media. And so all I need to do is make sure I've got my battery charged. I've got a little solar battery charger now, and I can have everything with me just by having my iPad and my Apple Pencil with me. And for if you're serious about it and you're going to spend a lot of time doing it, you want a little folding stool. You want to make sure you've got water to hydrate and a hat so you don't burn. But it's very, very simple to get set up to do it. And if you have the tools, whether it's a watercolor kit or an iPad, and you make sure you carry them with you, you're going to have that experience more often. And I really can't say enough, no matter what your skill level is, how much that impacts your experience of a place. If you sit and sketch it, it's just one of the biggest gifts that I've had in my life.
Now, have you incorporated painting on location into your classes? I mean, do you do that with students, or is that just a solitary uh, event?
Right. So when I am teaching on land, yes, often we do that. When I'm teaching at sea, I have traditionally just taught on sea days, and then on days when we're in port, I everybody goes off and does their own thing. For me, it might be sketching. Somebody else, might be doing that as well. But it's not an organized thing on the ship. Although it's something I'd like to look at in the future, maybe talk with some of the cruise lines and see if they want to add that component of, hey, let's go sketch on the streets in Venice or wherever we happen to be, because it is nice to do in a group. For one thing, there's safety in numbers and just camaraderie, even though you're very focused on your own thing. But I'll go out on my own and do it. And often enough, I have students who either want to do the galleries with me or who are happy to sit and sketch with me. And I'm always open to that. I love that.
Now, you kind of just alluded to it, and I mentioned in the introduction, you're sort of gravitating towards digital. You're doing things on your
Mhm.
iPad. You mentioned, or I mentioned in the intro, I mentioned Procreate
Yep.
and the Apple Pencil. Are you incorporating that in your classes?
Well, in a way, yes. So what I do, I go and do a sketch of a place. Like, let's say on this last trip, we'll use Corfu. So I go and I'm sketching, and I get back to my cabin, and I will look at what we're going to paint the next day. It's usually wherever we just were. I do a line drawing of it in Procreate. And then I break down how I'm going to teach the watercolor class. Like, usually you start with big loose washes and then you work towards more detail. And I'll paint each layer of the actual watercolor on my iPad so that when we start the class the next day, I can give them the line drawing, they can make the line drawing, and then I can show them layer by layer what they're going to paint, and what it's going to look like when it's finished. That's all a digital painting that's done in layers. And then I will physically paint the painting. I'll do the washes with a paintbrush and paper, and so will they. But they know exactly where it's going. They get to
Okay.
see me paint it, and they get to see it finished at the same time. So that started it. But then they became very curious about the iPad itself. So people started bringing their iPads to the sessions. We started setting up side sessions to teach them how to do
Okay.
that. Yeah. And now I'm starting to put together some videos that I'll have on my YouTube so people can see how I approach it, because painting plein air with an iPad is super simple if you have the right tools and know the approach, and very pleasurable. But there's a learning curve, and I like helping people through that learning curve to get them up and running. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like initially you use it as a teaching tool, but I was
Yes.
going to ask you, do people actually bring the iPad and I would love to be on a ship with you because I'm one of those people. My iPad is attached at my hip,
Oh,
so
perfect.
so to find a way to use it other than consuming information, which is mainly what I do, that
Yeah.
would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, well, I hope our paths do cross. I'd love to walk you through that.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Uh, let's talk a little bit about the future, Carol. What do you have booked, or do you have
Sure.
anything
So,
booked?
yes, I do. I've got some good ones coming up. So, when this airs, I will be on the Queen Mary. We are going from New York to Southampton, doing the loop of the British Isles, quick jag over to Bruges, which I love. It's such a beautiful place, and then back to New York. So, two crossings and some great ports. When I'm finished that, I'm home for, I think, just a month. Then I'm off to Australia again. We're doing Perth to Sydney, and then up the coast, and a few zips back and forth to Tasmania. That's on the Queen Elizabeth. And I think we're on for a total of maybe 7 weeks. I'm home for Christmas and New Year's with my family. And then we board, this is the one I'm the most excited about. It's the South America voyage on the Azamara journey. So we leave from Miami, we go through the canal again, do the ABC Islands, go through the canal. We do a really slow, intense tour down the coast of Chile. We have a few days in Antarctica, and then a slow trip up the other side. Lots of Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil. We end up in Rio for Carnival. They've got a
Wow.
spot blocked off front row for the parade in Carnival. And coincidentally, a lot of my friends are going to be down there for that. So that'll be amazing. We go as far as Barbados. And then I'm taking a short break, like taking 10 days off the ship while it does the Caribbean. I'm going to be at a literary festival in South Carolina. And then I get back on and go to Portugal, which will be great. And that takes me up until sort of mid-April of next year. So other than a few pit stops, I'm virtually at sea the whole time. So really, yeah.
So you're doing, it sounds like exclusively, correct me if I'm wrong, exclusively Cunard and Azamara?
That so far is what I've done. I do want to the person who does my bookings for me does do a couple of other lines as well, like Windstar and Regent, and I'd really like to get on one of those, have some of those experiences. And I'm open to exploring what other kind of opportunities I can find out there to get on ships and have these experiences. I love it. And now that I'm, kind of creating books and creating artwork on these journeys, it fits in with my lifestyle really well. So I can, yeah, yeah.
Well, you certainly are on two great lines. Both Cunard and Azamara are on my bulging bucket list. So I will make sure, I'm dead serious. I will make sure that when I decide to check one of those off, I reach out to you to see if it's possible you'll be on a cruise that I'm thinking about.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Well, if you're on my blog, on my about page, we'll say exactly what I've got coming up. So yeah, aim for it. I'd love to have you in my class. That would be so fun.
So speaking of your blog and your about page, tell our listeners how to follow you on social media and the internet.
Sure. So my blog and my website are kind of my main focus, and that they are at theillustratedvagabond.com. And you'll find my shop there. You can buy the book and see what I'm doing. I also am a frequent poster on Instagram, and on Instagram I am Illustrated Vagabond, so at Illustrated Vagabond, and same with Facebook. Yeah.
So you kind of mentioned it. Talk about your forthcoming book project.
Right. So it just kind of evolved all by itself, but I've got the prototype in my hand, and I'm super excited now to push it out into the world. It is called The Illustrated Vagabond's World Voyage Sketchbook, and it is 154 pages, all fully illustrated. It's all of the sketches that I made, starting from, I think the first one is me sitting in the airport with my bags in front of me, and the last one is us leaving Barcelona at the end of our tour. So it also includes, I did all these fun illustrations of how to pack for a world cruise. So I made kind of a paper doll and did all of the things that went into my suitcase. That's been a fun part of it. I did segments on what I read for each part of the journey and what I purchased. So those are really fun. And then I just did, I wrote the tale of where we went, what we did, and that's all sort of integrated with the art. So it's a big, fat, colorful journey. And I share how this trip was for me and all the places we went. And it's really fun. People can find that on my website. And if they go to the Illustrated Vagabond, head to the shop, you'll see the book
So
there.
it's right now, it's just pre-order, right? It's not out yet, right?
Yeah. It's not out yet. The first copies will land. I'll have them in at the end of September.
Okay.
So pre-sales, I'm just starting this week, and I will have some advanced copies. I think they're sending about 50 copies. So the first people who order will get them right away. But the rest of them will go out at the end of September. So it's pretty
Okay.
quick. And yeah.
Great, great. Carol, this has been a lot of fun. Before we let you go, a couple of light questions I like to end with, and maybe some fun questions, and then one I call this an oddball question because it doesn't necessarily relate to cruising. So,
Okay.
so the first light question, I use this because I get all kind of ideas, and I usually follow up on the ideas that I get, with some exceptions. So, what's your favorite cruise drink and cruise food?
Okay, fun. Okay. So my favorite cruise drink. I loved on this trip. This is going to give you a window into my self-delusion. I loved having really nice gin with diet tonic because somehow I thought all of the extra sauces and desserts, everything I was eating, skipping gym sessions, having diet tonic with my gin was going to be the answer. So I stuck with that. I'd sneak the odd pina colada in there. But yeah, gin and diet tonic was what the servers knew to start getting me as soon as I walked into the pool bar. I love that. I learned the drink to stay away from was something called a wing, and that's
Oh,
what a lot of the servers
yeah.
love. Those are dangerous.
I brought that up in I interviewed a guy who had done 7 years on a cruise line, and 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 he turned me on to a wing wine, and I keep forgetting. I say when I get on a ship, I'm going to order one and see the expression on their face, and I always forget to order it. But yeah, I've heard of that before.
Yeah, they're
Yep,
dangerous.
yep.
Yeah, I've seen some friends have to be wheelchaired back to their
Oh
room
my
after a
goodness.
wing session. So yeah, don't bump your head on the wings.
Yep, yep.
Favorite food. I just everything on the food on Azamara is. I mean, everybody says it's it is amazing, but it truly is. Um, I loved just every night saying to the waiter, "You've seen everything that's on here. What's great?" and letting them surprise me. And yeah, I love the food, which is why I needed the diet tonic.
Well, we're not going to let you get away without naming a favorite. Give us a dish.
Okay. Oh yes. So there was they do a chicken that's stuffed with leeks and cheese. And that was probably, if it was on the menu that night, I was having it. And there were fancier things, but that just flavor wise was beautiful.
Well, I just interviewed a gentleman who the interview was all about Cunard,
Mhm.
and he cruises everything, and he claims that Cunard is the best food at sea. So,
Yeah, it is fabulous. They're both so fabulous.
yep, yep. Okay, next question.
Mhm.
What's your most memorable or funniest or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
Okay. Are you, am I sure I want to tell you this? I'm going to. So we were heading into, where was it? Oh, it was Easter Island. And I was so excited. I had just finished reading the book, Easter Island, a novel, which if you're going to Easter Island, read it. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I was so excited about getting to Easter Island and I couldn't sleep. And I kept on, opening the curtain with my toes to see if I could see land yet. From my bed, I could grab the curtain, and then I thought, no, I just want to see if it's time yet, if we're there. And I heard some sounds, and I thought, okay, we must be close. And I stood up in front of my window, thinking we're at sea. There's nothing around. There's no one around. So I threw the curtains open. Not up and dressed yet, if you know what I'm saying.
I
Sure
get
enough,
the sense of where this is going.
there is a pilot boat. Oh, no, it wasn't a pilot boat. I think it must have been a tender, because there were two men standing on the roof of the boat right outside my window. I flung the curtains open. We locked eyes. We all three looked a little bit like, oh my God. I shut the curtains, went back to bed, and my husband's still sleeping. I'm like, I'll tell him about this when he wakes up. So, yeah, always peek through the curtains before you throw them open, even if you're in the middle of the ocean. That's my advice.
I'll tell you what, Carol. So last year was my first year with the podcast, and so at the end of to celebrate kind of my first birthday or first anniversary, I put together clips of different most poignant memories or memorable events. Many people propose on a cruise ship, embarrassing, a bunch of like the greatest hits.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun, and there were a couple of they were both men who had stories similar to yours. One I think was on a river cruise and didn't know that river cruises sometimes pull up, I mean, side by side with another river cruise. And he went out to the balcony in his boxer shorts and all. You know where it's going.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do the same thing on my second birthday, sort of my greatest and funniest hits. I got a feeling you'll hear your story again.
I'm going to make the blooper reel. Right on.
Okay, the oddball question. You have a large following, so welcome to the many the Illustrated Vagabond fans and Carol's friends who are listening. I hope you have enjoyed the Joy Cruising podcast and will come back again for more. Share one thing that my listeners and your friends and fans don't know about Carol.
Okay, I'm a pretty open book, but yeah, so I think when I'm on board a ship or out in public teaching in the city, all of that, I am, maybe people would peg me as an extrovert. I'm super friendly, super social. I love to share, love to get into things with people, all of that. But when I get finished with the project, where we live in Canada is on a mountaintop in a tiny ski resort, far from a major city. Like, we're 4 hours away from Vancouver. So it is isolated. And when I unplug, I go into full shutdown mode. I get my suitcases off. I get up there. I'll usually load the kids in the car. My husband will load up on groceries. We head up there, and the way I recharge is extreme hibernation. I go up there and unplug. I don't watch a TV. I put on a pair of sweatpants and just chill until all of the output has been refilled. And I would say that I live like a real hermit up there. Nothing but family, sometimes just completely on my own. And I won't break the barrier of the front door for 5 days. After a trip, I just lights low, super quiet, just nothing but nap and chill. And I disconnect like a cat. I go super low, and it's not until I feel ready to reemerge that I kind of pop out of that bubble. And I think that would surprise people who know me in my kind of social persona, but when I go down deep, and I love that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Maybe that I should, that might be a goal for me or an aspiration for me to reach. I am an extreme introvert, but
Uh-huh.
I cannot disconnect. I just cannot disconnect. So
Yeah.
so that's where we differ a little. But
Yeah.
but you've given me something to set as a goal.
Yeah.
To you know.
Nice. Got to
Well,
try it.
yep. Well, thank you so much, Carol, for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. I try to have representation of so many aspects of being at sea. I've had celebrities. I've had a woman who is in the Poker Hall of Fame. She's known as the First Lady of Poker.
Oh,
And you
fun.
and you might wonder, well, what does she have to do with cruising? She has a great cruising story. I try to have a great diversity, and you brought something totally different. An art instructor at sea, and this has just been a great conversation. All the best to you, and especially the upcoming book, and to the Illustrated Vagabond brand. And as I like to say, we'll see you on the ocean.
Sounds good. I'll see you there. Thank you so much. Love the show. Love what you're doing. And it's been a real pleasure to be here with you. So thanks, Paul.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99, can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.